The rain had already soaked through her jacket by the time she reached the school gate, but Emma barely noticed the cold. All she could see was her daughter's empty classroom window, the soft glow of lights that should have meant she was still inside. Her breath caught as she pushed through the doors, and the hallway echoed with every step. She felt the stares of teachers who didn't say anything, but whose eyes whispered the same silent conclusion she had been fighting for months. Emma was losing control, losing her daughter, losing everything she had left. She found Lily's teacher near the lockers, a tense look pinched across her face. "We tried calling you." Lily ran out after the argument. She said she didn't want to go. "Home." The word stabbed deeper than any blade could. Emma nodded numbly, barely hearing the rest. All she could think was how many mistakes she had made, how many nights she had worked late, how many mornings she had rushed her daughter instead of listening. She whispered a thank you and staggered outside again into the storm, desperate and terrified. The wind sliced cold against her face as she scanned the parking lot, the sidewalks, the playground. Panic buzzed in her throat. She called Lily's name again and again, her voice cracking until it barely rose above the rain. Each second stretched like wire pulled tighter and tighter, threatening to break. She whispered trembling apologies to the empty air, to her missing daughter, to the world that had watched her fall apart. Then headlights cut through the storm and a truck slowed beside her. She turned, ready to wave it away, but the window rolled down and she saw him, Caleb, the quiet single dad from her daughter's class. He leaned slightly out the window, rain dripping off his hair. "Emma, what happened?" Her lips trembled. She didn't want to fall apart in front of anyone, especially him. Someone who always seemed calm, steady, someone whose daughter adored him. She tried to speak, failed, then forced the words out. "It's Lily." She ran off. "I can't find her." Caleb didn't hesitate. He pulled over, opened the door, and stepped out even though the rain poured harder. "Get in, we'll look together." Something about the way he said together made her chest tighten. She wanted to argue, to say she didn't deserve help, that this was her fault, that a good mother wouldn't have let this happen. But she was shaking too hard, her breaths too shallow, and before she realized it, she had climbed into the truck with him. He drove slowly through the streets, scanning sidewalks and parks, calling her daughter's name with a steady voice that didn't break even once. Emma stared out her window, gripping her knees so tightly her nails dug into her skin. Images of Lily alone in the rain kept slicing through her mind, cold, scared, thinking her mother didn't want her. Tears blurred the edges of the streetlights until the whole world looked like it was melting. Caleb reached over, his hand hovering for a moment before lightly resting on her shoulder. The warmth of it made her inhale sharply. "Hey," he said softly, "you're not alone in this." But she shook her head. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I've failed. She hates being home. She hates me." Caleb shot her a glance filled with something she couldn't name. Kids don't run from the people they hate. They run because they feel something so big it scares them. But they always run toward the person they believe will look for them. His words sliced straight through her defenses. A sob rose from her chest and she covered her mouth, ashamed. She had spent so long pretending she was strong, that the feeling of being seen, truly seen, hurt almost as much as it healed. They drove past the darkened park, the closed bakery, the edge of the neighborhood where the streetlights flickered. And then, near the community garden, Caleb slowed suddenly. "There," he said, pointing. Emma followed his gaze, and her heart nearly stopped. A small figure sat under the wooden shelter, hugging her knees to her chest. Emma flung open the door before the truck had fully stopped. She ran through the mud, slipped once, recovered, and collapsed beside her daughter. "Lily," she choked out, pulling the trembling girl into her arms. "Baby, I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm right here." Lily clung to her like she had been drowning, and her mother was the first. Breath of air. Caleb approached slowly, giving them space but staying close enough to shield them with his presence. Emma held her daughter for a long time, rocking her gently. When she finally looked up, Caleb was watching them with an expression that made her chest flutter. Relief, mixed with something deeper, something he wasn't saying yet. But Lily was still shaking, her voice small as she whispered, "I thought you didn't want me anymore." Emma froze. Her throat tightened so painfully she could barely speak. "Oh, sweetheart, I never stopped wanting you. I never stopped loving you. I've been tired and scared, and I didn't know how to show you that none of that was your fault." Lily sniffled and buried her face in her mother's shoulder. Emma kissed the top of her head again and again, silently promising she would never let fear take her daughter from her again. Caleb waited until they both steadied before he spoke. "Let's get you two home." His voice had changed, gentler, but carrying a firmness that Emma hadn't realized she needed. She nodded, lifting her daughter carefully. Back in the truck, Lily curled against her mother's side, finally drifting into exhausted sleep. Emma brushed damp hair from her daughter's forehead and whispered small apologies. She wasn't sure Lily could hear. Caleb drove slowly, careful not to jostle them. For a while, the only sound was the hum of the engine and the soft breathing of a sleeping child. Then Caleb spoke quietly. "Emma, you're not a bad mother. You're someone who's been carrying too much alone." She swallowed. "It's still my responsibility." "Everything is your responsibility," he asked gently. "Every mistake, every emotion, every storm." He shook his head. "No one can survive like that." She looked down at her daughter's small hand, curled around hers. "But I should have—" "You should be human," he said softly. "That's enough." She exhaled shakily. Something warm flickered inside her, fragile but real. When he parked in front of her apartment, he didn't move to open his door. Instead, he turned slightly toward her. The streetlight outside bathed him in a faint gold glow, catching on the raindrops still clinging to his hair. "Emma," he said, voice low, "if you ever feel like you're slipping, like you're drowning, you can call me. You don't have to go through any of this alone." She blinked, her lips parting as the words soaked in. "Why?" she whispered. His eyes held hers in a way that made her pulse quicken. "Because I know what it's like to think you're failing. I know what it's like to be terrified of not being enough. And because—" his voice faltered just slightly, "because I care." Her breath stilled. She hadn't expected that, not from someone like him, someone who always seemed so steady. She looked down at Lily, then back at him. "Caleb, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything tonight," he murmured. "Just know you're not alone." She hesitated, then reached out and touched his hand, just briefly, just enough to let him know she heard him. He squeezed her fingers gently before letting go. After she carried Lily inside and laid her in bed, Emma stood in the quiet apartment and let everything crash over her. The fear, the guilt, the relief, the shocking realization that someone had stepped into her storm without being asked. She thought about his voice in the truck. The way he had said, "You're not alone," like a promise instead of a comfort. Her heart fluttered in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. The next morning, she woke to the soft sound of her phone buzzing. A message from him. "How's she doing? And how are you doing?" She stared at the words, feeling something warm spread through her chest. She typed back, "Better. Thanks to you." He responded almost immediately. "I'm here if you need anything." She didn't know where this fragile thread between them would lead, but she knew one thing for certain. Last night had changed something. The storm had taken something from her, but it had also brought someone unexpected into her life. Someone who saw her not as the failing mother she feared she was, but as someone worth standing beside in the dark. And for the first time in a long time, Emma allowed herself to breathe, to hope, to believe that maybe she wasn't as broken as she thought. Maybe she had simply needed someone to whisper the truth she had forgotten. "You're not alone." She repeated the words silently as she walked to Lily's room, kissed her sleeping daughter's forehead, and felt a small, quiet strength unfurl inside her chest. She didn't know what came next, but she felt steady enough to face it. And when she stepped outside later that evening and saw Caleb waiting by his truck with 2 cups of coffee, she felt something inside her shift. He handed her a cup, his fingers brushing hers. "Just checking on you," he said softly. She smiled, small but real. "I'm glad you did." They stood together in the soft light of the fading day. The storm finally gone, the world washed clean. And though neither of them said it out loud, both felt it, that something new, something frightening and wonderful, had quietly begun the night he whispered the words that changed everything. "You're not alone.